WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air each and every Tuesday at 2:30. We've been coming to you now for quite a few years. I think sometime around maybe 8 or 9 years now we've been on the air. WCLN, Star Communications, Star TV, Channel 16. Also a summation of the Sampson Weekly newspaper. We try to keep you informed and as much as we can educated on things that oftentimes is happening right around you, or maybe questions you had. We can get yours answered along with a lot of the other folks that's asking similar or the same questions. The show today is kind of a time of the year show, but it's a 24/7 for our guest today, Sergeant Jessica Byrd. Is it Sergeant? Still Sergeant?
Still Sergeant.
Still Sergeant Jessica Byrd. Jessica, we've had you on before, but it seems that the prime time to have you on is in the spring of the year. And today's show is interesting because you brought a number of little friends with you, and you've got another little friend in your hands there. When you came in today, you had some kittens, and one of those kittens is laying, seems to be very peaceful on your hand. You're a very animal-loving person.
Yes.
Would that be a good way to put it?
Very accurate.
In the world of animals, it seems there's more contact with people that may not be daily animal people during the spring of the year.
That's right.
Weather gets warm.
Everybody's out and about, and so are the animals.
Some of it's tragic. Some of it is wonderful, I guess. What's some of the biggest challenges you see today?
So, and it's kind of been an ongoing issue in the county that I'd love to see an end in sight, but it's not. It's kind of perfect that I had to call right before I came because I had to pick up 4 of these little guys. And so what we see a lot of times is, and we discussed it in the past episode, a lot of people, when a stray shows up, they feel very sympathetic, which is easy to do at this age. They're cute and they're cuddly. But what happens is the responsibility then, it's just, okay, we're going to feed it, but we're not going to take responsibility. So like this is a direct outcome of that. These were actually found under a pile of trash that had to be picked up today by some of the city workers. And it's one of the biggest problems we have in the county because this leads to overpopulation. So there's 4 kittens in this litter. Of course, mom is nowhere to be seen because she's probably a feral cat. So like you said, people are getting out, they're being active. And with the feral cat population, especially the feral dog population, which we've had some incidents in the past where folks out walking, enjoying the weather that turn into some serious medical issues because of attacks. So definitely education-wise, if you have something that shows up, say you have a feral cat or a stray dog show up, we're wanting to be called immediately versus before it gets to this level where there's a lot of little ones walking around and then the population starts to explode. So it's really responsibility, calling as soon as they show up, and so we can try to curb the problem. And that's something we've been battling for years, the stray animal population in Sampson County.
Define the term feral for us, feral cat.
So feral is one in which, and it can happen 2 ways. Like this one would be considered feral because it was actually born by a feral cat, meaning there is no owner, it's a stray cat, it's never had any human contact until today. And so, which the good thing at this age, that we can totally reverse that. This will be, give it 3 weeks, this will be a highly adoptable kitten at the Sampson County Animal Shelter. But feral animals are ones that are not handled. They may come close to eat. They may actually eat out of your hand. But once you go to try to handle them, that's when, and we have a lot of bites that occur that way. It seems like a very friendly animal, comes right up to you, will eat out your hand. You go to pet it, you go to pick it up. A lot of folks will stop on the side of the road to try to pick up a stray animal, and they get bitten. So feral is one simply that there is no ownership. It was not raised with human contact. It's essentially wild.
So that's the next, I guess, definition would be what wild is,
Yep.
and the connectivity with wild. Do you see a lot of this kind of animal, the cat or the dog? What is more prevalent in our area for an animal that you see that is feral?
Definitely the feral cats, and that's because they can certainly multiply at an astronomical rate. Within six months, they can, this could be having babies of her own.
Wow.
So, and they have multiple litters. Like this is a litter of 4. We typically see minimum 7, upwards of 14, 15, which that's high end. But normally your average litter size that we see is 7. So in a matter of months, 7 cats can turn into 20 cats, and it just keeps going on. We've had, I can tell you countless times, we've been contacted after there are 50 to 60 cats on a property. And that takes a lot of time.
That's enormous.
Yes, and that happens, that is a daily occurrence, that we get calls, hey, I've got 20 cats. And it's not that 20 cats just one day showed up, it's they have been allowed to breed over an extended amount of time, and then it gets to that point where, of course, the person who initially felt sympathetic was trying to help an animal in need, now they're overwhelmed, both with the physical number of cats and the financial responsibility to try to feed that many.
And we see sometimes in other places in North Carolina and even in towns where a home appears to be just completely inundated with cats or dogs and that kind of thing. Do we have that kind of thing going on here in eastern North Carolina?
Oh, yes. And in Sampson County.
Particularly in this area, you see?
Quite frequently, yes. A couple years back, there was a home that actually had to be condemned here in the city. And I think we removed 30 live and probably 15 deceased animals, cats, from that residence.
Was it occupied by human beings?
Yes.
It's hard to process that kind of thing.
Right. And what I get a lot when I go to calls, the number one question is this animal going to be put to sleep? And there are certain instances, and I'm very truthful, there are certain instances that can occur. But if you can bring them in when they're young and highly adoptable, that makes a huge difference versus waiting for them to get a year or 2 years old, where as somebody who's coming by to adopt a new pet to bring into their family, they're much more inclined to go for the younger, what they feel they can raise around theirself or their children or other pets, versus one that's already a full age and size.
I noticed oftentimes, and I guess in my childhood, we've had, you could say, feral dogs or stray dogs or what have you, and I've always, living on a farm, have had a dog close by, and then of course when I got old enough to have animals, I would have larger dogs. I always, for some reason, enjoyed the large dogs. There's always responsibilities that you talk about that people need to take into play, and many times folks will say, well, my 5-year-old or 3-year-old just wanted a puppy to play with or something. Talk to us about what that parent or guardian for that child needs to understand about their responsibility for feeding, for getting the shots, all the kinds of things. It can get pretty financially burdening.
Yes, it can. And so upfront costs, puppy age is when you're going to have a lot of vaccinations. There is only one that for dogs, cats, and ferrets is required by the state, and that's a rabies shot, which fortunately that's about a $9 shot. We're very lucky to have 3 veterinary clinics here in Sampson County, which is great. And like I said, the base rate there is $9, and that's only once a year that you have to get that done. But up front, you can look into a couple hundreds to get the full series of puppy shots, kitten shots. Then you have to also add into diet. So, we're really phasing out of giving the backyard scraps. Now you're looking at some of the higher end bags of dog food at minimum $30, upwards of $50, and those are grain-free, chemical, just all kinds of stuff on the market. But you have to get adequate nutrition for the animal, water. And then you're going to have to look at, since 2014, we've had a county ordinance that says you can't allow your animals to run at large. So used to it was kind of like, I'm going to get a dog, it'll stay in the yard, no problem. Now what we're looking at more frequently is the dogs are being allowed to run loose. So when you look at cost-wise, it's very important when you're considering getting a new pet, considering the confinement cost. Used to it was just, okay, well, feed and water, that's not that much. But what we're running into, we're having to cite people over and over again for allowing their animals to run at large, whether it's that they're being a nuisance by tearing up others' property, getting in somebody's trash, or the aggression, which is when the neighbor comes out, the neighborhood dog is chasing people back in their home or being aggressive, and that can add up in civil citations, more so than people probably would expect. So it's not a cheap endeavor, and that's if, fingers crossed, you have a healthy animal, you never have any medical emergencies you have to pay for, because veterinary costs can be very expensive.
The animals seem to me to be something that's been part of life for me from young, but as I look at it this decade and maybe the previous decade, we've been moving more and more to those animals becoming somewhat a part of the family structure.
Yes.
That, and again, as being somebody that has always had dogs around and so forth, but this is something different now. It's almost, I mean, you see animals being given nerve pills and all kinds of things.
Anxiety.
And folks my age will look at each other and go, what am I missing here? You know, you're giving a dog a nerve pill? Come on, really?
Yep.
So it does get expensive.
Highly expensive. And there are certain insurances you can get. You know, I've a lot of folks I've talked to, they have credit cards put aside just for those emergency situations. But yes, it's a very costly. If it goes into the medical side of it, other than, like I say, the yearly vaccinations, food and water, that's not as expensive as most people would think. But the confinement, the medical, those are when you start seeing the rises. And then, you know, if you have an animal that say is aggressive, you know, the county, if your dog commits an incident, that can wind up costing you quite a bit in fines.
And when we come back from this break, I want to talk a little bit about some of those animals that you've talked about in the past with us and kind of elaborate on some of the more exotic kinds of animals that oftentimes you see. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll stay tuned, we're going to talk about some things that you may know about, you may be concerned about. Not to scare anyone, but there's all kinds of things out there that you might not be aware of.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. We're talking about four-legged creatures. We may even talk about some two-legged creatures. Just depends. We're talking with Jessica Byrd, Sergeant Jessica Byrd with the Sampson County Sheriff's Department. Jessica, when I introduce you, I always want to remind people that historically, back years ago, we had folks that were designated as dog catcher, the dog catcher, this kind of thing. But the position you hold, you're a supervisor, you are a sworn law enforcement officer. You go through all the training, all the expectations that any officer you see that has a blue light, you've done that. The difference is you got a specialty field dealing with animals and everything from small to large animals that they may meow, whinny, whatever they may do, but that's your area of responsibility. So I guess I like to elaborate on that a little bit so folks can understand that, you know, if there's something that's going on that's illegal, it may not have anything to do with an animal. Just because it's the animal control truck don't mean that they might get a little blue light and say, we need to talk for a minute.
That's exactly
That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. So we've kind of put your position in a maybe a new format for folks that didn't understand that. I want to talk about now, since we've, and welcome back to your little furry friend there, Dave.
Yep.
We're probably going to need a name for that friend before we leave so we can introduce it. But you've got a little kitten in your hand. It goes from that to dogs. We talked about feral cats, feral dogs. But then there's just creatures out there that we're not sure of. We know, I think it's been pretty much proven we've got coyotes in the area. And these are literally beyond feral. These are the wild animals that often maybe are the predecessors to dogs.
Yes.
What problems are you seeing with that, and is it something to the point that folks need to be aware? Because quite frankly, there's many people like me and others out there that are joggers or they bike or what have you. Is it something we need to be concerned about?
A lot of the concerns that I'm hearing are with not so much people, but of course owned pets or folks that have like a turkey production operation that, you know, these animals are breaking in there and getting a hold of some livestock. We've had some cats go missing that we suspect, it's hissing. And that's kind of a neat thing. This one just, the eyes and ears have just opened up at this age, but they usually, all they could really have was smell, so that's why they hiss. Little neat fact. But well, like I said, the complaint we're getting with coyotes right now is that they're going after pets and livestock. Not a lot of issues with people so far that we've heard, other than they see them, and of course it makes people uncomfortable. And we've had discussion in the past, try not to make your residents appealing. If you do have scraps, don't throw them out. If you have outside pets, feed them, early of the morning, late of the evening, just enough that they,
consume
a daily feeding. Don't leave out excess food, because that's what's going to draw in wildlife and other stray, or as I've termed, feral dogs or cats.
But these coyote that I've heard people mention to me, and I know you're on top of this, it's as though they're concerned not only for their pets, but also if there's 2 or 3, they tend to run in packs.
Pack up, yeah. They pack up, and again, it's not that we're really, I haven't heard of really any confirmed incidents here. Other parts of the state, yes, there have been incidents where, and most of the time those were probably diseased animals, meaning they're sickly or something's going on with them. Because most of your wildlife is going to keep a safe distance from people. Now, like, again, a small pet, they're not going to be that intimidated by, but they're going to keep a healthy respect for a human being. Right. Small children, yes, that would be a concern, because that's not as intimidating to a wild animal as a grown adult.
So if you got a small child, 4 or 5 years old, and they're playing in the yard in city or the county, as far as that goes, sometimes we think it's the city, so they're alien to that, but that's not necessarily.
And really, the city is robust with wildlife, because again, like I said, there's a lot of food put out, trash put out, and that's an attractant. We had the bears in the Royal Lane last summer. That was that was an ordeal. But it's the Wildlife Resource Commission has a website with a lot of helpful tips. If you're concerned, especially if you do have small children, you've seen wildlife coming closer and closer to home that could be harmful. You can always contact one of their agents, or of course us at the sheriff's office, and we'd have no problem going out assessing the situation and determining what needs to happen.
Do you often get calls that you end up referring to the State Wildlife Commission, that you feel like I don't want to get into that, or do you respond to any of those calls?
We respond to it all. We certainly do a lot of mutual aid work with the Wildlife Resource Commission. If it's in a domicile, that's pretty much our terrain. Wildlife is an excellent resource, but we at the sheriff's office make it very clear we have no problem handling it. We normally refer if it's anything involving a bear. We've had a couple alligators that have taken up residency here in the county.
No way.
That became more visible. They've always been here. Just a few that have become more visible, more kind of hanging out near the banks. We had one there in the Rose Hill area that was a common occurrence. Wow. And it finally moved on. So not too many we refer, but we try to assist. And plus it breaks up the monotony. It's nice to have a wild animal call versus always having to, deal with the domestics. And
yes, for folks that are listening, if you just heard Sergeant Byrd mention alligator and bear, we do have those in there.
Oh yes, and we've really always had them. It's just there's certain situations where they're seen. And a lot of people go into kind of a frenzy, panic mode. Oh my, what should we do? They've really always been here. It's just more opportunistic, and especially with the construction, with the major storms we've had, which maybe, especially with the alligators, if that blocked their normal waterway, they may stay in a certain area. The one in the Rose Hill area, it kind of got barricaded up because of the hurricane and all the debris. And but it was right there. It had a feast of turtles where it was at. So it was the happiest alligator in Sampson County.
Wow. So
but
food
people,
source is turtles for those.
Oh yeah, well, they're opportunistic.
One of the many food sources.
Right. And we always, what was happening with the one there, we got people were stopping and trying to throw it chicken and snacks to get pictures with it, and we do not ever suggest doing that.
One of the worst things they can do.
Right.
And that or bear.
Yes.
Is the bear that are you aware of that we have in the area, are they black bear, brown bear? Black bear. Mm-hmm. So they are carnivores. They do eat meat. They're meat eaters. They're not the bears you see in the cartoons that eat honey.
And the black bears, I mean, they do enjoy, they're omnivores, so they can go both. Okay. And they probably prefer a diet of berries and things like that. And especially like your possums and raccoons, which is one of the bigger wildlife we deal with, that's especially the raccoons and the possums. There was a gentleman in the city who had a blueberry bush, and there was a raccoon that visited him every afternoon. He'd sit like a little person and pick his blueberries, which made, of course, the homeowner very uncomfortable because you associate wildlife like that with the rabies virus.
Absolutely.
But, if they're healthy, if they're not causing harm, it's kind of a neat thing to see. But as we always say, keep your distance. Don't entice them. Don't give them a reason to be there. So.
Is there a travel territory for black bear and alligator and other kinds of wild animals that they operate in? Do they normally stay within a 5 to 6 mile radius, or are they moving from one area to the other?
So most of your adults have pretty much set up their own little home area where they generally stay, hunt. When they have young, that's when you'll see them all together. But especially with bear, once they reach a certain age, especially the young male bears, they're going to get kicked out. So we get frequent calls, there's a bear going down the side of the road, or there's a bear going through a community. He's really just trying to find his little place in the world, and because he's been kicked out from his home territory with mom, and of course with more than likely the larger male bear that's already taken up that territory. So once they start trying to look around, they could, you might see the one was at Royal Lane Park. So, I mean, it's not uncommon to see them in residential areas, subdivisions, that's common because they're kind of looking for a quick and easy meal, heading on down the road to find them a good place to set up and start living their adult lives.
When you talked about the one at Royal Lane, was that a year ago? And so we're talking about in the city of Clanton, and we're talking about in the county seat, the largest right here in Sampson County. But when we look at other areas of the county, do you see more in the northern end of the county, southern end? Is there regions
southern, definitely southern.
Because it's more
wooded
less
area. Population. Yep.
And they tend to shun people.
Right. And they don't, other than the opportunistic feeding, like with the scraps or trash or pet food that's been left out, they don't really have a reason other than maybe, and you hear a lot of stories, bears, if they get bored or interested, I mean, they can break into houses, they can bust their windows, get in campers, they'll go exploring. Yeah,
we've seen some of the video on TV where they would, I don't know how they do it, but it's like they can take the door on a car and flip it.
Flip it right open.
And you can figure you pretty much got a total loss once they get in the car.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Because they're going to, especially if they're just kind of checking things out and being exploring, they'll tear some stuff up. Because a bear is, several hundred pounds of power with razor-sharp claws and teeth. So they can, just their fun day and fun afternoon exploring can be
total
devastation financially for whatever they've gone after.
And those are the kinds of things I think people need to understand, and I'll call it the psychology of a wild animal. They need to understand that that's totally different in many cases as to what we see is as normal or what we may expect. We don't need to get caught up in that, should I say, cartoon world where you think that this is something you
cute,
can pet.
Cuddly,
And the more they can distance themselves as human beings, the better off they are.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to take a break. And when we come back from that break, I want to kind of get a little bit more into some of the expectations, particularly the legal expectations and some of the things you know about that people need to know about, and that's the criminal and civil expectations that can come to play. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Jessica Bird, Sergeant Jessica Bird with the Sampson County Sheriff's Department, in charge of controlling animals, both domestic and wild here in the county.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that adds a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody try to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We Should Know is on there. I want to remind you the email address for the show is weshouldknow@gmail.com. That's weshouldknow, all one phrase, no breaks. weshouldknow@gmail.com. Send us your comments, request about new shows, things that you would like to hear more about. People that you think should be on the air that other folks may need to be aware of, and particularly subject matter and content. If you don't know particularly where to research that or find the, quote, experts in the area, give us that message, give us that information. We'll see if we can find someone to talk about that subject. We've been very fortunate over the past 8+ years to have some very talented, dedicated folks on, and today, of course, is another one of those examples. And again, I want to welcome you back, Jessica. The last time you were on, you were Jessica Cottrell. You're Sergeant Jessica Bird now.
Yes.
Have married another law enforcement officer there, so
Yes.
we got that. And anywhere you got a blue light in the community, I think we ought to kind of give it a little thanks and praise there. So
Well, thank you.
for all of those folks that carry a badge or are out there making sure that we are safe, and if you call a number, you can get a response.
That's right.
That's very important, and it kind of is what I call the foundation of a civilized society. So thank you for what you do. We're talking animals today. When I think about this, I want to talk a bit about this and spend some time on it, because often we've talked about, and you've given us some instruction on what to expect and the cost and the kinds of things of what we refer to as responsibilities for animals, particularly dogs. Over the past year or two, and I looked back and did a little bit of research, but it just seems to be, there seems to be an uptick, including death. I think one in Hope County, up in Selma area, there was a dog that had to be literally shot, taken down, euthanized at a hotel. By literally, it just blows your mind to think about this, but apparently the dog had attacked and had locked down on somebody's arm, and the officer had got there and literally had to shoot the dog.
Yeah.
Is these kinds of things increasing? Are people, their expectations becoming the wrong expectations with certain animals and certain breeds of animals and those kinds of things, and all of a sudden they get in over their head and they go, well, you know, it's like you said a while ago, I'm just going to turn my dog out, and
Yeah.
and if something happens, they'll just have to deal with it.
And so there's a lot of instances where, and I've said it for quite a bit of time, animals are kind of like people. You can never predict, you cannot always predict their behavior, certain situations. There's a lot of things you can do to prevent bites and severe attacks. Namely, a lot of our bites are from, and it's kind of almost it's a simple lesson. We certainly learned it as children. You know, you got to keep your hands to yourself. It's hard to explain to a small child. Don't if you don't know the animal, don't pet it, don't go near it. That's what we have a lot of our attacks that initiate from, is small children and even adults. Quite a few adults get bit in this county because they try to feed or pet or pick up an animal that's not theirs. And so that results in a bite, which is that's the worst case scenario. Severe attacks, you know, we've had, this county has had deaths. We have had near-death attacks from animals. The worst one I've seen is there on Brewer Road. A lady was attacked by a pack of 7. And they were, as I always reiterate, responsibility, they were, it was a dog had showed up at a gentleman's house. He started feeding it. The dog Brett had a litter of puppies. They all packed up together. And that's just, it's a violent or a volatile situation when they all get together, because they get overly confident, especially in canines. They're going to get overly confident, and that can result in disaster. We had one that I believe was a medical case. I believe it was medically caused, but the animal attacked its owner over a medical issue. Dog not knowing what's going on. And you know, I've always said they're kind of like having a pet is like having a 3-year-old until they, you know, pass away. That's kind of the mentality they have. They don't, you know, you can't explain to an animal this isn't right or that's not right. You kind of have to teach the person. And then, you know, you are going to have animals. A lot of people say the breed, any breed can have an animal that's hyper aggressive or, you know, can be very territorial. And that's, you know, that can be a dangerous situation. That plays back to, again, if you get a breed that is known to be hyper aggressive, you have to look at confinement. You can't just say, what we hear a lot of times is, well, it protects my house. And that's understandable if it's confined to protect your house.
Exactly.
If it's allowed to run at large, it could attack really anyone in the vicinity, even an innocent bystander, somebody who maybe their car broke down, they're coming to use the phone. If they're attacked, you know, there's consequences to that.
And I think that's the big issue is for folks to understand, and you did a great job the last time we were talking about some of these issues, but folks that own these, according to statute, and one of the, I guess the North Carolina statute talks about owners or owner's liability, and it covers everything from female dogs to sheep killing dogs and failing to kill a mad dog, even things that people have responsibility to do, even to include reporting, and they don't do it. So it's paramount for folks to say, well, I've got this dog now. And how many times do you hear this? People say, oh, this dog would not hurt anybody. And yet you get there and you've got to not only restrain, but put your hand on your firearm to just make sure you don't get injured. So what creates that mentality that we can't understand?
It's a safety. This animal has never bothered me. I've had it around my grandchildren, and I don't know why, especially with the younger individuals getting bit. You know, if they go up to a strange dog, it's kind of like, and I kind of try to, it's hard to distinguish between children and animals based on what I do, because I see so many similarities. You know, with small children, you try to teach them, you know, well, don't share and don't take this from another child at daycare. But with a dog, you can't explain that. You can't explain to a dog, okay, this little girl is probably going to come up and she's going to want to hug you and put her hands on you and get close to your face. The dog is not going to understand that. The dog it has a couple of signs it's going to show you.
Fight or flight mentality.
Pin the ears back, licking the lips repeatedly. It's going to give you a couple indicators before it's going to say, okay, well, now I'm going to let. And how they let you know is with a bite. And sometimes it can just be a simple nip with a puncture. Sometimes it can turn into a mauling, which is, you know, horrible. But it's a fine line between you've got to teach both the person and then you have to look at, you know, yes, how your animal is with you can be totally opposite of how it's going to be with a stranger.
We had an incident a few months back over in Cumberland County, and the gentleman was attacked and literally ended up in the hospital as a result of dog. And I can't remember the exact location, but I'm thinking it was somewhere on Clinton Road over there. But it was an interesting case because I was thinking about when we were going to do this show, even believe it or not, even way back then, and I was thinking this would be a good case example. As I understood, the person was standing there. The owner that owned the dog, quote, got out of the pen. You know, just drop it at that. But yet, the owner didn't know the dog had gone across the road or something, and attacked this guy. And it was, if it were not for a passerby, the man probably would have been deceased.
Yeah.
So it's so critical, and I think as a whole, and I guess I'm thinking about myself years ago when I had, you know, large dogs, Great Dane, that kind of thing. You know, and I think the world, I still like dogs like that, but I didn't really, at the age I was at, I didn't really understand that was mine and an extension of it. So when we look at the criminality of it, talk to us about that a bit. We're talking from everything from misdemeanor to right on up the food chain as far as charges, correct?
Oh yeah, and so of course most of your statutes cover liability. What's going to cost you, of course, is a lawsuit, a civil case. And that could, the damages awarded there have been astronomical in some cases. Even with a simple bite, say, just like that scenario, if it hadn't have been that severe, you open the gate, say to your property, the dog slips by you, goes and nips somebody on the ankle. But for whatever reason, there's not you haven't gotten your dog up to date on rabies. And if that person should have to get the post-exposure prophylaxis, that can be anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 that most people aren't obviously going to have laying around. So then you could be civilly liable for that person's vaccinations. And especially, again, I can't ever harp enough about having stray animals. I've seen a lot of folks get bitten by stray animals and then have to pay $8,000, $10,000 out of pocket for these shots. Just call us. A lot of people are scared to have an animal wind up at the shelter, but we're trying to do with their best interest at heart, and to avoid those. And the criminal costs can cost quite a bit, especially if the sheriff's office wind up having to impound. We've had one restitution amount up at $5,000.
Wow. And so that, it really comes down to both the criminal and the civil could end up with people losing property, losing things that they could not have imagined they got themselves into simply because they felt like they were doing all the things right. And maybe they were, but again, this is, as you've pointed out a while ago, is a creature that functions on a very mentally low level, and they react as an animal, not as what we would anticipate a human being to react.
Right. And a lot of folks, they're bitten by their own pet. Say there's a medical reason the animal has to get medication. If the dog doesn't want it. We've had a lot of folks, I can't believe, my dog bit me. Well, if you're trying to give them medication they don't want to take, that's an easy reaction, is a quick bite.
Well, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into what dangerous dogs are, and talk a bit about dogs that may be defined as dangerous and your relationship with public health, which is a key role in your job as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we go to break, I want to remind you to call a friend. We're talking about animals. We may be talking about your animal and not know it, but if you have an animal that has a predisposition and might bite someone, or you think you've got a good security system and you turn that animal out at night and somebody gets bit, you could be in trouble.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. Again, I want to remind you of the email address, weshouldknow.edu@gmail.com. weshouldknow.edu@gmail.com. Also, we have an address for you for snail mails, cards. You want to send us a letter, whatever, comments on the show. Just send that to Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. We'll be glad to take a look at that and to make all efforts to respond. And if we can pick up on someone that can address or someone that you would like to see on the show, or someone that has information or even content you would like us to research, we'll be happy to look into that for you. Today we're talking about something that's probably you're going to be faced with, and that's various kinds of animals, to include your animal and what your responsibility is. And nobody knows more about that than Sergeant Jessica Bird. Jessica, we've talked in a number of the segments here about various kinds of things, but the precautions against attacks by dangerous animals is twofold. Also, if someone is aware of an animal, and we'll use a kind of a country, because you and I both live in the country. So therefore, if you're traveling on a road, whether you're riding a bike or you're out for a walk this spring, and the weather now is getting in that direction, and you see a dog that is chained up, and the dog, runs and tries to get to you and flips upside down and all this kind of thing, it's good to understand that dog's there, and for you as an individual to take precaution. But number two, also, if it's something that you have a fear of
Right.
by just walking, or if your child is maybe learning to ride a bicycle when they're 5 or 6 years old, that puts you in fear, they need to let you know that, because you need to make those owners, because those owners may not be aware
Right.
that even in this county, I mean, I guess there's more tolerance depending on where a person lives, but with you, I'll just say this, with you running the show, you're going to make sure people are safe, and we're kind of blessed with that in a way. But is it reasonable for me to tell folks to call and say, look,
Yes.
there might be a problem there?
Because a lot of folks think for me or either of my two guys to declare a dog dangerous, it has to have broken that chain and bitten someone and sent them to the hospital. So fortunately, the state of North Carolina has what's called a potentially dangerous dog. That is that dog that without provocation is highly aggressive, comes at you in an apparent manner of attack, which is the snarling of the teeth, charging you, but doesn't quite get to there to bite, whether it's still confined or whether it just stops short of. So you can always call the sheriff's office when there's a dog that's showing you those concerns before it gets to that area of, you're having somebody's been bitten in there at the hospital. We would, of course, educate the person, explain to them, look, if you have a dog that's showing this behavior, it could be a matter of time before it either escapes a pen. If it's tethered, we have so many bites on record. Well, it was tied up, but it broke its collar, or it snapped its cable, or the chain finally coming to. If you have a dog that you certainly see is that highly agitated at passerbys, whether it's joggers, lawnmowers, a lot of animals, lawnmowers just drive them into a frenzy. But if you see that, go ahead and try to curb that behavior. If that means moving them away from visibility of that constant thing, because the more amped up that animal gets and agitated, it's a ticking time bomb for an incident where we're going to get involved. And preventative measures are great. Once an incident has occurred, we have to look at, yes, we have an owner of an animal, but we have a victim. So both have rights to, the owner can still retain their animal, but the victim has a right for that incident never to happen again. So there are certain stipulations we put in place in this county, not just the state regulations, but Sampson County has a very strict ordinance when it comes to having a potentially dangerous or dangerous animal.
It's really it's a no tolerance kind of thing.
We certainly, when we get these incidents, if there's any way possible to deem them, that's what we're going to do. And that's because we don't want it to happen. We've seen it time and time again. And even in the rare instances that we gave someone an opportunity, maybe, and especially if the victim said, well, I don't want their dog, to put on these restrictions, and then a couple months, the incident
that's back
revolves
on
again.
you then.
Right, and so that's not something we're super tolerant of here, period, unless the victim is adamant that they don't want that to be put in place. But if it results certainly in a bite, a death of either a person or a domestic animal, we're going to go ahead and make that call and deem the animals dangerous.
For folks that you deal with like that, and you look at on a regular basis, and with them being told, that furthers the expectation on their part to make sure that animal is secure. It's almost like this is count number one. Nothing's happened, but the dog is clearly aggressive, and this animal could hurt someone. You got your first strike here.
Right. And it's a kind of a simple thing. We unfortunately still have kind of and it's still prevalent in the county, the mentality of, well, I live in the country, I've got so many acreage, it's never been a problem, but we would like to start seeing a transition to curbing these incidents before they ever happen. So obviously, like myself, I work from 8 to 5. I'm on call after hours, but during the 8 to 5 hours, my animals are confined. Would I love for them to be able to just run frolic free? Yeah. But I don't have to worry about incidences of my animals getting, say, struck in the roadway, them getting taken. taking that little bit of time to confine them appropriately is great. And again, a lot of folks, we get several calls about tethering. So-and-so leaves their animal tied up 24/7. So there are certain restrictions if you tether them that they have to have, which is most with anything. They have to have the shelter, they have to have access to fresh drinking water all day, and shade. And I bring up the shade comment because we're getting ready to get into our hot temperatures. And I can assure you, if we get a complaint of one that has been left out in excessively in a hot day, and it has no way to cool down, no shade to get into, that would, you might come home and find a note on your door where we have taken the animal, and it could definitely result in criminal charges, low times civil, but normally when we find one that's left in a situation like that, we're gonna go after the criminal aspect, not the civil. But it all boils down to all incidents are preventable. That's the key thing to say. I've been doing this since I switched over from the patrol division of the sheriff's office to the animal control in 2012. I have yet to see, we spiked, we're kind of leveling out, but it's still constantly the same, and I hate to say irresponsibility, but it's irresponsibility that is causing a lot of these incidents. And it's a lot of, kind of push-offs. Well, like you said, I would have never thought my dog would do this.
Exactly.
If we go just one step ahead, okay, let's prevent this from happening with appropriate confinement, appropriate supervision, maybe we can cut some of these calls out.
And I think sometimes too that any dog, as you pointed out a while ago, can be dangerous and can hurt other people. But there's certain breeds that seem to be built more for attack kinds of things, or for fights and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's certainly some that look more, an aggressive-looking breed.
Yeah, the Rottweilers and the Pits and all those kinds of.
Doing this for years is.
Any of them can.
I can tell you, our most aggressive breed is the Chihuahua.
Yeah.
I can say that easily throughout the years.
Yeah.
Right. But again, almost with all these incidents, it's preventable. These incidents should have and could have never happened if there was just a little bit more level of responsibility. And again, I know a lot of folks have the idea that I don't want my animal confined constantly. It's not a good life to live. But the civil, criminal, and even some of these incidents, the animals have had to be put down.
Yeah.
With a little bit of prevention, wouldn't have those issues.
And I think too is that caring for, to ask yourself the question going in, can I care for this animal as it should be? If I've got a job and I'm working a 12-hour shift, and then and many people now are working 2 jobs, do I really have time for this? And
we get calls, I've had buku calls, a simple, a crate, like you would keep inside for crate training. I've seen, and we've gotten calls where the animal's left in there for 12 hours at a time in their own feces, in their own urine, and that's not something we can, if you don't have the means to build a confinement pen or a larger area, then you have to make that decision as a responsible person. This is not something I can handle. The shelter takes owner surrenders at no charge. There's not a financial fine.
Questions, no.
So you have to, and we want people to reach that level before, because if we get involved, normally we have to look at the benefit of the animal. If that animal has been shown to be put in a situation of torment, torture, and if it's due to these confinements or other means suffered, we're going to take out those criminal charges, and you'll have to explain yourself in court as to why you did these actions.
And we see a lot of stuff now in media in which animals are becoming kind of a trendy thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, almost like a little fashion statement. And then all folks get into it and they're going, I don't know what to do. And all of a sudden, guess what? You get a call and there's a Chihuahua or whatever running around a stop sign on a rural road somewhere, and they put the dog out. That's even worse.
Because I hear a lot of, and we have a very prevalent, the pit bull breed. We have that's prevalent in Sampson County.
Trendy, very trendy.
And what I hear a lot of times, if I go and there's a heavy chain And I say, you know, that's a strong breed, as we've discussed. Educate yourself before you
Absolutely.
get into that.
Thank you for being with us, and again, and also best to your furry friends there, and hope you will find them a home. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Sergeant Jessica Byrd. We'll be back again next week with you. For now, we appreciate you being with us, and as always, we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.